Have you ever felt like you're walking down an uncertain path? You feel a sense of purpose in your heart, but the next steps are unclear. The road ahead seems foggy and you're unsure of how to proceed. Have you ever found yourself asking, how do I live with purpose when I don't have all the answers? It's a feeling many of us face at some point in life. We know there's a purpose for our lives, but sometimes the direction is not as clear as we'd like it to be. We long to walk in God's will, but it can be hard when we don't have every detail of the plan laid out in front of us. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the uncertainty of not having all the answers, but here's the truth. We don't need all the answers to live a life full of purpose. God has already placed higher purpose in our hearts, and His plans for us are bigger than what we can fully comprehend in the moment. Even when the road ahead is unclear, we are still called to walk with purpose, trusting that He is guiding us step by step. We all have a higher purpose that God has planned for our lives, but sometimes the road ahead is unclear and challenging. The desire to know exactly where we're going and how things will unfold is natural, but it's important to remember that faith and trust in God are what will carry us through the unknown. God's purpose for our lives is not dependent on us having all the answers up front. It's about trusting Him, even when we can't see the whole picture. Even without all the answers, we can still live meaningful, purposeful lives by leaning on His guidance and following the path He set before us. Today we're going to explore how to live with purpose even when you don't have all the answers. It's easy to get stuck in the feeling of uncertainty, but the key is trusting God. He knows the way even when we don't, and He has already gone ahead of us. Living with purpose isn't about having everything figured out, it's about trusting that God has a plan for our lives and that He will direct our steps. Walking in faith is a crucial part of this process. Faith means moving forward even when we don't know exactly where the road leads. It's trusting that despite the uncertainty, God's hand is guiding us. We don't have to have all the answers right now, and we don't have to see the whole road ahead of us. What matters is that we take the next step, trusting God to lead us where He wants us to go. Another key element of living with purpose is patience. Waiting for clarity can be one of the hardest parts of following God's plan. It's tempting to want everything now, to have the entire map laid out for us. But sometimes God's timing is different from ours. He calls us to wait on Him and trust that in His perfect timing He will reveal the next step. Living with purpose when we don't have all the answers can also mean embracing the unknown with peace, knowing that God is in control. Trusting God requires us to surrender our need for certainty and embrace the mystery of His plan. It's when we let go of the need to control every outcome that we begin to experience the freedom of trusting in God's bigger picture for our lives. So if you find yourself in a place of uncertainty, remember that your purpose is still unfolding, even if you don't have all the answers right now. Trust in God's plan, walk in faith and be patient. Keep your heart open to His leading, and He will guide you in the right direction. The path may not always be clear, but you can trust that God is with you every step of the way. If this message spoke to you, please like, share and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational messages like this. Let's continue to walk with purpose, trusting that even in the unknown, God is working things out for our good. Living with purpose, especially when the path ahead is unclear, requires us to trust God even when we don't have all the answers. It's easy to feel paralyzed by uncertainty when we don't know where we're going or how things will turn out. We often want to have everything figured out ahead of time, to see the entire road before us and to know all the steps we need to take to reach our destination. However, living with purpose doesn't require us to have all the answers up front. It requires trusting God, trusting that He has a plan for us even when we can't see it clearly. When we face uncertain times, we can be overwhelmed by the need for clarity. But trusting God in those moments is essential. Trusting God means stepping forward in faith even when the next step isn't visible. We must remember that God doesn't always give us the whole picture right away. Instead, He leads us step by step, guiding us through each moment and situation. Our job is not to have everything figured out, but to trust that God is leading us toward the purpose He has for our lives. In life, there will be times when we face moments of confusion, doubt, or fear about the future. Maybe you're in a season right now where you feel unsure about your next steps or where you're headed. It's during these times of uncertainty that trusting God becomes even more important. We may not have all the answers, but we can have confidence in the one who holds all the answers. God knows the end from the beginning, Isaiah 46:10, and He is with us every step of the way. When we trust God, we are essentially surrendering our need for control and embracing His sovereignty. This does not mean that we will have every question answered immediately, or that the path ahead will always be easy to see. What it does mean is that even in the unknown, we can rest in the assurance that God has it under control. He will lead us through the uncertainty and help us live with purpose one step at a time. One of the clearest examples of trusting God in the midst of uncertainty is the story of Abraham. Abraham's journey shows us that God's calling often doesn't come with a complete roadmap. Abraham was living a peaceful life in Ur of the Chaldeans when God called him to leave everything behind and journey to an unknown land. In Genesis 12:1, God tells Abraham, "Go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you." Notice that God didn't give Abraham a destination, nor did He give him a detailed plan. He simply told Abraham to go and that He would show him the way. Imagine Abraham's reaction to this call. He had no idea where he was going or what would happen once he left his home. It must have been terrifying to think about leaving everything behind: his family, his security, his community, for a journey into the unknown. But Abraham's response was one of trust. He didn't have all the answers, but he chose to believe that God's calling was worth stepping into even without knowing the entire picture. Abraham faced many challenges on his journey. He didn't always understand God's plan, and there were moments of doubt. For example, when God promised him that he would be the father of many nations, Abraham was already old and his wife Sarah was barren. It seemed impossible, yet Abraham trusted in God's promise, even though the answer didn't come immediately. In Genesis 15:6, the Bible says Abram believed the Lord and He credited it to him as righteousness. This moment is crucial because it shows that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. His trust in God wasn't based on seeing the whole picture. It was based on his faith in God's character and his ability to fulfill His promises even when things didn't make sense. Despite the challenges and the unknowns, Abraham trusted God. He trusted that God had a plan for him, and that plan was bigger than anything he could understand in the moment. Because of Abraham's trust, he became the father of nations and the ancestor of many. His story teaches us that even when we don't have all the answers, trusting God and taking that first step of obedience can lead to incredible results. As God's children, we don't need to have all the answers immediately. We are not expected to have everything figured out before we take the first step of obedience. The key is trusting in Him, knowing that He will guide us through the unknown. God doesn't expect us to navigate life on our own. He is with us every step of the way, offering guidance and wisdom along the journey. Trusting God isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that God holds the answers. It's about believing that even in the uncertainty, God is still leading us to our purpose. Just like Abraham, we may not see the full picture, but we can trust that God knows the way and that He will lead us in the right direction. When we walk in trust, we allow God to direct our paths. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us of this truth. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse speaks to the heart of trusting God. We may not understand the details of the journey, but we can trust that God will make our paths straight. He will guide us through every season, even when it feels like we're walking in the dark. So when life feels uncertain, when you don't have all the answers, remember that you don't have to have it all figured out. The journey of faith is about trusting God even when the next step isn't clear. As you move forward in faith, He will reveal the next step. He will provide the direction you need, and He will give you the strength to fulfill your purpose. To live with purpose, we must embrace the uncertainty of life by trusting God in all things. Life doesn't come with a manual, and God's calling doesn't always come with a step-by-step guide. but trust is the foundation of living a purposeful life. When we place our trust in God, we allow Him to lead us into the fullness of His plan, even when the way ahead is unclear. Whether you're standing at a crossroads or simply walking through a difficult season, know that God is with you. Trust Him in the uncertainty and take that next step with faith. You may not have all the answers, but God does. And when you trust Him, He will lead you exactly where you need to go. Trusting God in the midst of uncertainty is one of the most important things we can do as we pursue His purpose for our lives. Just like Abraham, we may not see the entire picture, but we can trust that God is guiding us towards something greater than we can imagine. Walk in faith, trust His leading, and know that He is faithful to fulfill His promises. When you don't have all the answers, it's easy to feel overwhelmed or even paralyzed by uncertainty. But this is where faith and patience become crucial. Walking in faith means trusting in God even when we don't understand the full picture or the next step. And patience is the key to living with purpose in these moments of uncertainty. God doesn't leave us to figure everything out on our own. Rather, He calls us to trust in His timing and to patiently follow His lead step by step. In a world where we often want immediate answers, it can be challenging to wait and trust in God's timing. However, this waiting period is where our faith is developed and refined. It's in the moments of uncertainty, when we don't have all the answers, that our faith is tested. We have to trust that God knows what He's doing, even if we can't yet see the full path ahead. Patience is not just about waiting passively. It's about actively trusting God and continuing to walk in faith one step at a time. God calls us to walk in faith even when the road ahead seems unclear. Trusting in Him doesn't mean that everything will be immediately revealed to us. It often means taking each step with faith without knowing what the next one will look like. God's plan often unfolds gradually, and our responsibility is to keep moving forward, trusting that He will guide us along the way. Walking in faith is not always easy. In fact, sometimes it's downright difficult. But that's where patience comes in. Patience is not simply waiting for something to happen, but having the endurance to stay the course when the outcome is unknown and the path is unclear. Patience, when coupled with faith, allows us to continue moving forward even when we can't see the entire picture. It teaches us to trust in God's perfect timing and to believe that even in our waiting, He is still at work. When we walk by faith, we must remember that our journey is not a sprint, but a marathon. God doesn't always give us all the answers immediately. He asks us to trust Him step by step. Faith allows us to keep walking even when we don't know where the path will lead. And patience allows us to wait for the full revelation of His plan, knowing that each moment is part of a greater story that God is writing for us. God doesn't promise us that everything will be clear right away, but He promises to guide us along the way. In moments of doubt or confusion, we can rest in His assurances and walk in trust, knowing that His ways are higher than ours. Isaiah 55:9. Walking by faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting God's wisdom and timing and allowing His Spirit to guide us every step of the way. To illustrate the importance of walking in faith and patience, let's consider the story of Moses and the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. Moses' journey is a powerful example of how walking in faith doesn't always mean having all the answers or seeing the whole picture. Moses was called by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, but the road ahead was full of challenges and uncertainty. He didn't know exactly how God was going to fulfill His promise, but he had to trust God with each step along the way. The pivotal moment in Moses' journey came when the Israelites reached the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army was chasing them, and they were trapped between the sea and the advancing army. It must have seemed like an impossible situation, no way forward and no way back. In Exodus 14:13-14, Moses speaks to the people saying, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." At that moment, Moses didn't have a clear plan. He didn't know how they were going to cross the Red Sea, and there was no human way of escape, but he walked in faith. Moses trusted that God had a plan even when it seemed impossible. God had already promised to deliver his people, and Moses had faith that God would make a way even though he couldn't see how it would happen. And then in Exodus 14:21-22, God told Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea and the waters parted. The Israelites walked through the Red Sea on dry land, and the waters were held back until they safely reached the other side. The Egyptians in pursuit were swallowed by the returning waters. What was an impassable obstacle turned into a miraculous moment of deliverance, all because Moses chose to walk in faith and trust God, even when he didn't know the solution. This story is a powerful example of how walking in faith and patience works. Moses didn't have all the answers. He didn't know how they would escape the Egyptians, but he trusted in God's timing and followed his lead. God didn't ask Moses to figure it all out. He simply asked him to trust and obey. And because Moses walked in faith, God made a way through the impossible. The story of Moses and the Israelites crossing the Red Sea is a vivid reminder that walking in faith doesn't mean we understand God's plan immediately. Sometimes we're called to walk forward in trust even when the way ahead is unclear. Like Moses, we may not have all the answers. We may not understand how God is going to bring about his plan, but that's where faith and patience come in. Walking in faith means trusting that God will reveal the next step when the time is right, and it requires the patience to wait for his perfect timing. There will be times when we feel stuck or uncertain about the future, but like Moses, we are called to trust that God has a plan. We don't need to have everything figured out right now, we just need to take the next step trusting that God is leading us even when we don't see the whole picture. As we walk in faith, we need to be patient, trusting that God is working behind the scenes. Patience means trusting in God's perfect timing and knowing that he is in control even when it feels like we're waiting. In moments of uncertainty, we can hold on to the truth that God will provide the answers and guidance we need when the time is right. Walking in faith and patience is essential when we're living with purpose, especially when we don't have all the answers. God calls us to trust him even in the unknown and to wait patiently for his timing, just like Moses. We may not always know how God will fulfill his promises, but we can trust that he is faithful and that he will make a way when there seems to be no way. Remember, faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting God to lead us step by step. Patience is not about waiting passively, but about continuing to walk forward, trusting that God is guiding us in his perfect plan. When we walk in faith and patience, we allow God to shape us, refine us, and lead us to the purpose he has set for our lives. Trusting God, wait on his timing and take each step with faith, knowing that he is faithful to fulfill his promises. In life, there are times when we feel uncertain about the future. We may not have all the answers or even understand why we're going through particular circumstances. The journey can seem confusing and we might question whether what we're doing truly matters. But even when we don't have all the answers, we can still find meaning in every moment. Purpose isn't always about reaching a clear destination. Sometimes it's about embracing the journey itself. Every action, every decision, and every small moment can be meaningful, especially when we approach them with sincerity and follow God's leading. God's purpose for us is often revealed not just in grand milestones, but in the everyday choices and actions we take even when the road ahead is unclear. Living with purpose doesn't require having all the answers up front. It requires living faithfully in the present moment, trusting that God is working through us in ways we may not immediately see. Even if we can't see the full picture or understand why things are happening, we can find meaning by trusting in God's plan and embracing each moment as an opportunity to reflect his love and purpose. We live in a world that often values immediate results and clear outcomes. We want to know where we're going and how we're going to get there. But when life doesn't offer us a clear map, it's easy to feel lost or question whether what we're doing is truly meaningful. However, purpose is not just found in the destination, it's found in the journey. It's in the moments when we're uncertain about the path ahead that we can grow the most in our faith and trust in God. We may not understand the why behind certain seasons, but we can still find meaning in our actions even when they seem small or insignificant. One of the most important things we can do when we face unclear moments is to embrace them as opportunities to grow. Even if we don't know exactly what the next step is, we can choose to walk with purpose and integrity in the present moment. Purpose is not just about achieving specific goals, it's about living with a heart that is aligned with God's will, seeking to serve others, glorify God, and make a positive impact where we are right now. When life feels uncertain, taking small, faithful steps is often the most meaningful thing we can do. We don't need to have a full understanding of the future in order to live with purpose today. Sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones where we choose to act with sincerity regardless of how things may appear or how long the journey may seem. God works in these moments, shaping us, molding us, and using us in ways we don't always understand. A powerful biblical example of finding meaning in unclear moments is the life of Joseph. Joseph's story is one of suffering, betrayal, and hardship, yet through it all, God was working behind the scenes to bring about something greater. Joseph's life shows us that even in the midst of pain and confusion there is purpose. Every stage of his journey, even the difficult and unjust ones, had a bigger purpose that God was working out. Joseph was the favored son of his father Jacob, but his brothers were jealous of him. They sold him into slavery and Joseph was taken to Egypt. He faced many trials, including being falsely accused of a crime and imprisoned. At any point along his journey, Joseph could have given into bitterness, anger, or hopelessness. Yet through it all, Joseph chose to trust God and live with integrity. His circumstances didn't dictate his faith. Even in the hardest moments, Joseph found meaning in following God's lead and choosing to honor him. In Genesis 41, Joseph eventually rises to a position of great power in Egypt, becoming second only to Pharaoh. God used his time in prison, his struggles, and his years of uncertainty to shape him into a leader who would ultimately save his family and an entire nation. Joseph's journey wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. Every trial, every setback, and every moment of injustice had a purpose. He didn't understand why he was sold into slavery or why he was falsely accused, but he trusted that God was working through those challenges. When Joseph finally reunited with his brothers, he revealed to them that he had forgiven them. In Genesis 50:20, he tells them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph recognized that God had used every part of his story, including the suffering, to fulfill his greater purpose. Joseph's story teaches us that even when we don't understand why things are happening or when life seems unfair, God is always working behind the scenes. We may not see the purpose in our current struggles, but if we trust in God, we can be confident that every moment is part of his greater plan. Living with integrity, even in the hardest of times, allows God to use us in ways we cannot always see, but that are part of his perfect plan. Though we may not always understand God's grand plan immediately, if we live with integrity and follow his lead, every moment can be part of fulfilling his purpose in our lives. Joseph's journey shows us that even when things seem unclear or unfair, God is still at work. God's plan for us is bigger than any momentary setback or trial we face. He is faithful to work through the challenges to bring about his good purpose both in our lives and in the lives of others. Like Joseph, we can trust that God is working through every detail of our lives, even the painful or confusing moments. The key is not necessarily to understand the purpose in every moment, but to trust that God is at work and that he is leading us through the journey step by step. Purpose doesn't always come in the form of big dramatic moments. Sometimes it's in the quiet faithfulness of continuing to walk with God, even when we don't know exactly where we're headed. Every moment has meaning, and every choice we make matters. When we live with integrity and faith, God uses us in ways we may not fully understand, but his purpose is always unfolding. Even if we don't see it now, God is using each step we take in faith to bring about his greater purpose for our lives and for his kingdom. Living with purpose in unclear moments is about trusting that God is always working even when we can't see the full picture. Like Joseph, we can find meaning in every trial, every setback, and every moment of uncertainty. It's not about having all the answers or understanding every detail of God's plan. It's about trusting that God is faithful and He is at work in every moment of our lives. If we choose to live with integrity, to walk in faith and to follow God's lead, we can be confident that every step we take is leading us closer to fulfilling the purpose He has for us. Every action, every choice, and every moment is meaningful when we live it for God's glory and His kingdom. Let us embrace the unknown with faith, knowing that God is working through us even when we can't see the full story. Trust in Him, live with purpose, and let every moment of your life be a testimony of His love and faithfulness. Though we may not always have all the answers, God's calling is an invitation to live with purpose even in uncertainty. It can be easy to feel lost or overwhelmed when the path ahead seems unclear, but trusting God, walking in faith and patience, and finding meaning in every step are all essential to living a life full of purpose, no matter how uncertain the road may seem. The key is remembering that even in our confusion, God is with us, guiding us and working through every moment, big or small. Our purpose isn't contingent on having all the answers, it's about trusting in the one who holds the answers and following His lead. When life feels unclear, it doesn't mean we're off track or that we've missed our calling. Instead, it's a reminder that God works in the journey, in the waiting, in the trusting, and in the act of walking forward without knowing the full story. Every step we take in faith is a step toward fulfilling His purpose for our lives. He uses those moments to refine us, teach us, and shape us into the people He has called us to be. Purpose isn't always a destination, it's a way of living with intention and trust in God's plan, even when we can't see it all right now. I want to encourage you to step into God's calling each day. It may feel uncertain at times, but that doesn't mean you're not on the right path. Don't be afraid of the challenges that arise or the uncertainties ahead, because God is with you every step of the way. He will help you live according to His purpose, and He will equip you to bring change to those around you. Trust that His plan for your life is bigger than anything you can understand right now, and embrace the journey no matter how it looks. Remember, each day is an opportunity to trust, to walk by faith, and to live with purpose. Even when you don't have all the answers, God is faithful to guide you and fulfill His purpose for you. Let His peace lead you as you continue to follow Him. If this message spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational messages like this. We are here to walk this journey of faith together, and we hope that these messages can encourage you as you step into the purpose God has for you. As you continue to walk in faith, trust that even in the moments of uncertainty, God is working through you. Keep moving forward in His purpose one step at a time. God's plan for you is unfolding, and He is faithful to lead you through it. Lord, thank You for the calling You've given me. Help me to live according to Your purpose, serving and loving those around me. Give me the strength to bring positive change and to walk in Your love and service just as You've taught us. Thank You for being with me in every step of this journey. Help me trust You when the path is unclear, and to walk by faith, knowing that You are leading me every step of the way. In Jesus' name, amen.